Hello and welcome to Confidential Fan Guild, or the all-new Confidential Fan Guild. I'm Alex, superhero enthusiast, and I'm here with a magnificent Magpie.
Hello!
And the wonderful Steve Baxey.
I've got nothing sarcastic to say.
Was that sarcastic?
I have no idea. Is that sarcasm? I feel like it doesn't fit the definition.
We'll go no then.
Okay, then.
Anyway, we're here to talk about Not Totally Robots. That is Blade Runner, the final cut, which was the film that we watched. And that's my choice for this time, so I guess I'm the one stuck hosting. We sort of decided to do this film last minute because we realized that Steve and I both really like it, and Magpie was not so hot on the film. But Magpie, why don't you start, because you seem to have come around on the film a little bit more on this viewing.
Yeah, well, I think it was late at night the last time I was watching it, so I might have been a bit tired, a bit out of it, so I might not have been as patient with it as I would have liked. I still don't think it's a terribly interesting story, and that's not... It's also because I've seen this story told in very similar ways in various other media as well, like Star Trek, TNG, and various other things. So it is probably very historic from a historical context. It's a very good film because, like, you watch it and it's definitely, you feel like you're being introduced to a whole new world. A whole new world. So. Yeah, it's just some of the stylistic choices. I find the film very dark. Like, there's not really a lot of light throughout it, and that kind of bothers me a bit because, while I do like dark themed films, and it just doesn't feel right to me. But yeah, but I do like the what do you call it? Undertones of the film, because I feel this is about soldiers coming back from Vietnam and how they were treated when they came back. I feel very, very much that's the underlying story that's really being told here is about soldiers coming back from war and how they're treated, because it's I'm talking in circles.
It's certainly something that's very topical right now, anyway, with the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Mm.
And veterans not getting... Yeah, veterans not totally getting, the compensation and the treatment and stuff that they need, because we force them to go do really terrible things, and then it fucks them up, and we say, sorry about that, but, we're not going to really help you. I didn't totally read that theme into it when watching. I guess I looked at it more of sort of a general, are they human or are they not human? And part of being human is we are mortal, I guess. But Steve, what are your thoughts on the film, and kind of what angle did you approach this from?
Well, I'm a big fan of noir, and part of what your criticism was earlier with Magpie was that you didn't enjoy the fact that it was so dark, but that's was the thing that I really, really loved about it, is that it was so dark and it was really future noir, as if it's not as much sci-fi as it is a noir film. And if we were in 2019 or this alternate 2019, that's just what the world would look like, and that's how noir would be shot again. So I really enjoyed that, and it plays with all of those really fascinating noir themes about, like, truth coming out in darkness and the hero with a very strange moral code and kind of lies to preserve social order, and it does all of that at the same time doing those high-grade sci-fi themes of what makes you a human being. So every time I watch this film, I always jump into it from a philosophy of the mind kind of perspective, and then because it's such a noir thing, it always makes me take a step back and look at everything in a really practical sense. I think it's a really good dichotomy that way, of being so meta and being so down to earth at the same time.
Interesting. Yeah, it's incredibly film noir, And the thing that's interesting about it is it is so much rooted in the time period, though, too, is it feels like that kind of 1930s film noir storytelling, but at the same time, you could not do this plot in the 1940s. This requires the replicants. It requires, people who are almost human to even, bring that up and explore it. But it's just it's like they made a noir film, but it was set in this time period that had all this crazy technology, and that factors into the mystery.
Right.
One of the things, Magpie, that you had mentioned was just sort of the pacing of the film, and you maybe not having enough patience for it the first time seeing it. On rewatching this, I definitely did notice this movie gets really slow, halfway through.
Mm.
Did you guys notice that as well?
Yeah. I didn't have as much of a problem with that, though. Because if you go back and watch stuff like The Big Sleep or Maltese Falcon or Double Indemnity, they always tend to get much slower around the middle anyway. And it's always there to just kind of build up the thrill or to build up the atmosphere behind whoever the leading man of the film is. And I thought it worked for the most part. It's boring, but I don't see it as boring necessarily as a criticism because people find different things interesting.
Mm. I didn't feel so bad about the pacing this time. Because, I think it's just the way I watched it. I didn't notice it as much this time around. I don't really know why.
I found it to be slow, but I kind of feel like it's deliberate to some degree. And not just because that's the way stories often go, but it's like this film starts off as this very film noir kind of detective thing, and kind of an action movie too, in a sense. And then partway through, things get revealed, and it starts, Deckard starts having to explore, the nature of, what is a replicant? How can you tell a replicant and a human apart? And that gets into these very, very weird kind of existential themes. And the film just goes, it kind of tricks you in a way. It sets itself up as one thing, and then it goes in this completely different direction to explore the nature of being and stuff. Which is cool.
That kind of misdirection gets paid off pretty well too at the end, where you think something's going to happen, Decker's going to die, but Roy ends up saving him, and it has a much bigger meaning behind it.
Because the thing about this is an adaptation of the Philip K. Dick novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And the thing that I find the most interesting about this film is that the book came down on it very clearly, saying they are not human. Androids, I guess, don't dream of electric sheep. This says absolutely they do. This film is pretty unequivocal, I think, in its themes of saying that, yeah, the replicants are human. They're people. And the only other film that I can think of that is like that, that's an adaptation, is A Clockwork Orange, where the meaning of the book is the opposite of the film. And to some degree that's because the American printing of the Clockwork Orange book is missing the last chapter or something. But I'm sure Kubrick probably would have taken it in a different direction anyway because he's Kubrick. But I don't know. I just found that something.
One, the space oddities a little bit like that.
A little, but I mean that's something that those two, the book and the film, were written at the same time.
Right.
So
I still have not seen that.
We should cover that at some point. It's I don't know if you don't like the pacing of this film, you'll like the pacing of that film because it's very, very slow and meditative. But it is a masterpiece.
I don't really like that film.
I love it. But
I agree that it's probably genius and all of that. I can't get into it. Is the thing.
No, that's totally fair, and I totally understand why people don't like it, and that's just because I think it's a great film, but it's not necessarily an easy film to watch.
Yeah, fair enough.
And Blade Runner is kind of that way too, with the pacing and with just some of the things that they explore. It gets dark aesthetically, but it also gets very dark and goes to some dark places thematically, because you have the replicants kind of on the theme of what Magpie brought up with the soldiers kind of returning, because Roy Batty, the main replicant of the group of them, he was designed as a soldier, and he's only supposed to live 4 years. He returns and he kills the guy who owns the company that built them. It's kind of a, machine turns on its creator sort of a thing.
I thought it was really interesting how a machine designed for war was so subdued and calm and thoughtful and planning right up until the end of the film.
Yeah.
Like, do you think it's not what you'd expect with him?
Do you think that's maybe because of that, though, in that he's engineered to be calm under fire?
Possibly. I just wonder why he, like, as a soldier, he wouldn't just go gung-ho straight for Tyrell. And then at the last minute, when his worldview is a little bit destroyed, that's when he succumbs to his programming and becomes a little bit less than human.
But maybe that goes with the themes of, the replicants being human, and that he has the full range of capabilities that a normal person has.
Yeah, probably so.
And I mean, to be a good soldier, like I don't remember, like maybe he's supposed to be like an officer one, and he's like a leader. So maybe that accounts for his kind of mind and his ability to plan things out in advance. But
yeah. I get the impression that that one's a bit more cold and calculating than the guy that's at the beginning, that's being interviewed, and he's just like, he just snaps and shoots everyone. He seems more like the soldier type. I can't remember. I know that both girls are like pretty much pleasure robots, so they're pretty much prostitutes. So, but yeah, I did get the feeling that he is more of he plans things out, and then when it didn't work, it was just like, stuff it, I'm gonna kill this guy. That's the only thing I've got left is my revenge.
Yeah, kind of, and that, to an extent, maybe because he was created for a specific purpose, the only way that he can get meaning back in his life is to remove the person who gave him that purpose.
Mm.
Yeah, and it was interesting how it's so much like a human god kind of thing with him, where they always intentionally say things like meeting your maker and calling him father and things like that. So it's almost like he's getting payback for being made in the first place, being forced to contemplate so much of these mysteries of human existence that people can get frustrated with, especially when they're as young as he technically is, of like 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
he
so
even
really
says at the end of the film...
Sorry, what?
I should say, he even says at the end of the film, like, he lists through all of the really crazy shit that he's seen. It's clear that he... Yeah, it shows that he is a thinker. He's definitely contemplated this stuff.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, just the way he lists things off, and these things, seen so much things that humans could never comprehend, and it's all in an attempt to become a human in the first place.
Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to explore a little bit of just the world building in this, because that ties into some of the religious themes of the Tyrell Corporation is in this gigantic fucking ziggurat in the middle of LA. It's shot, the scenes with the guy who runs the company, it's almost like he's God up there. All the rooms are lit by candlelight. It's like he's in heaven. He can see, he can look down on the city when he's up there. That's the only time we actually, I think, see the sun in this movie, is when Deckard goes to visit him at the beginning of the film. Because everything else is just rain, and for LA, that's kind of frightening, because I apparently screwed up the world.
Yeah, just how dark and menacing everything is until you get up to his level. Did you guys notice the chess game?
Yeah.
The whole immortal game that they were playing out, and just how symbolic it was of Roy and his kind of father figure and going against him, of sacrificing all the higher pieces and then beating them with just the pawns because they think that they're useless.
Mm-hmm. Which is exactly what Well, it's
Sorry, go ahead.
exactly what the company does with the replicants. It treats
Yeah,
them
exactly.
like pawns.
Yeah, it doesn't realize how dangerous they can be, so they voluntarily give up their higher footing just to make a statement about who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Being a chess player, I didn't even notice that. I didn't notice what they were doing because I wasn't paying it. Like, when I play, I just like move the pieces around. I don't pay attention to where they're going. Really, like they do, like kings, bishop do, blah blah blah. I don't pay attention to that. But yeah, an interesting philosophy there. It's very interesting.
There's I guess a lot of a sense too that, like I mentioned, they have kind of screwed up the world and super polluted it, and there's a lot of talk of like the colonies and other planets that they've, visited and colonized, and people live there because it's way nicer than Earth because of what we've done to it. And there's a lot of stuff about like animals, and like you can't find real animals, or if you can, they're extremely rare, and people have to make animals, and that's very expensive too. So I thought that was really provided kind of an interesting backdrop of like it's extremely bleak, the situation that they're in, and the only reason people stay on Earth, it seems, is because they can't get off of it.
Yeah, and that's such a noir thing to do, to live in like a destitute part of the world just because that's all you know or that's all you can get at the time. And it was really exaggerated. Some of the culture of the 1990s that this film came out.
80s.
80s, was it 80s? Okay.
Yeah.
But everyone in the 80s thinking that Japan was going to basically take over American culture, and how they really play that up in this film with Japanese advertisements everywhere.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Apparently, shooting this movie was a nightmare, and no one in the entire cast liked doing it just because of how atmospheric it was. Like 50 days of shooting in nothing but darkness and rain, and Harrison Ford like really, really apparently hates this movie.
I've heard that, and I feel like that factors into his performance and actually enhances his performance somewhat, because Deckard just does not want to be there. We should maybe explore him a little bit, since he's the main character of the film in some ways. He is the Blade Runner, which I guess just means he used to hunt replicants, but he's given that up. So it's a classic story of like he's retired and he has to, be brought back in to do one last job, sort of thing. And he really doesn't want to do it. And he's drunk all the time, which again is very noir.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I don't know. I really thought that him not enjoying the experience actually made the film better in a way.
Oh yeah, definitely. Did you guys have any stance on the Deckard human replicant debate people seem to have?
I don't know.
Because I think ultimately the film says it doesn't matter, but it's still there.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is there is ample evidence to come to that conclusion. It's relatively circumstantial evidence, but you could very easily make that case. But yeah, the whole point at the end is, it doesn't matter. Replicants are human, so if he is a replicant, then so what? And the whole, they only live for a certain amount of time thing, that echoes that we only live for a certain amount of time, and we have to make the most of it, and that, kind of convinces him, I guess, to run off with Rachel, Sean Young's character, at the end of this, and just kind of make the most out of his life. There are so many freaking Batman Begins things in this. Like, I knew that this film was a big influence on Begins, but watching this back, I was like, holy shit, there's this and this and this. They go on and on.
Even though I've only watched it twice, I don't think he's necessary. I don't think he's a replicant, but I think there's enough evidence there to show that he isn't. I think, but I've only watched it twice, so.
Well, let's kind of review that case a little bit. And there is the thing of, he learns that they can implant memories in the replicants to make them seem more human, and he has this recurring dream of like a unicorn, and we don't seem to know what that's from. And
replicants also
Yeah.
seem to have like this taste for photography that Deckard obviously has.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's him like not answering whether or not he passed his void comp test.
Yeah, well, and the thing too is the whole test is really interesting in that he first tests Rachel in the movie, and it takes him, like such a long time, like way longer than it should to determine if she's a replicant or not. So
Yeah,
like
over
it's
100
clear.
questions.
Yeah, it's clear like you can't even with the test tell. So functionally, like what is the difference?
Yeah.
So,
It's
do,
sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, do you like if he is one? Do you think he's a more advanced model than any of the other ones that we see in the film? Like, could
Yeah.
you make the case that he's just been he hasn't been gone at all? Like, he hasn't been a plane runner before, or if he was, it was
It's implanted
like
memories.
yeah, it's implanted memories. Like he's like the beginning of the film. This could be you could make the argument that that's the beginning of his life. Like the first time we see him, that's like the first time he's turned on or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he doesn't have this backstory. Like they're just feeding him stuff to say that it is, or that he's a new model of the Decker, and the Decker beforehand's just passed away. And,
That could be too.
Yeah,
And
people make up the fan case that there's like a line of Deckers every 4 years. They just make a new one.
oh, okay.
Mm.
Well, it fits too with two things. One, in the whole pawns chess game thing, and that I just find it hilarious that they would make replicants to hunt replicants. It's just playing with the pawns. But the other thing is, he has a handler with the police, and that's Gaff, Edward James Olmos, in this movie. And Gaff makes all these origami things that seem to hint at whatever Deckard seems to be feeling at that moment. And at the end, he makes one that's a unicorn, which is the recurring dream. And how would Gaff know about the unicorn unless he knew that Deckard was a replicant?
Yeah,
and that was implanted in him.
Mm.
And then
Funny thing is, I thought Gaff was the replicant.
Yeah, maybe Gaff's a replicant who knows?
well, then Gaff also has that great final line in the film where he basically summarizes, well, we all die anyway. So even if he is one, or even if Decker is one, to him and to basically what the film's trying to say, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, like she won't live, but then again, who does?
Yeah, it's a great line.
Yeah,
How
so
do you
they
guys
seem
feel
to be...
about... Sorry,
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, how did you guys feel about Decker almost pseudo-raping Rachel, where she tries to get out of his apartment, but he kind of forces her back in?
That definitely was...
It was a little tough to
somewhat
reconcile
unfavorable.
every time I see it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it's just the noir alpha male kind of thing to do, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing. It fits with a kind of a Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe sort of a thing to do, old school kind of masculinity. But yeah it's not cool. Don't do that, people.
Not cool. Yeah. I had a bit of problems with that first time I watched it, so...
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm. I guess when we're recording this, there's been a big controversy recently with regards to Game of Thrones, and kind of a similar situation there with forced sex and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where, like, I think too, like, he's supposed to be the protagonist.
Right.
In a way, and it's kind of hard to root for him after that.
But then there's also the argument that maybe you're not supposed to root for him. Maybe he's supposed to be like the darker side of humanity, and Roy trying to figure out what to live for is what a human being should be doing in the first place, and it's ironic because he's a replicant.
Mm-hmm.
I am kind of on Roy's side. It's just
Yeah.
I don't agree with anyone's like any side in this. I'm like 100% behind. The way I see it is like Decker is just the window into the world, and Roy's like the stance you should be taking is like, because all they're after really is more life, and I think that's what everyone's looking for really is.
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
To aid Roy's case, there's a little bit of like, we seem to talk about this theme a lot lately, but there's a lot of like Nietzschean Ubermensch kind of things going on with Roy. About how his view of the world is the view that everyone should be taking, and he's clearly the superior man in every circumstance, easily being able to just toy around with Decker in that final terrifying scene. So it's really interesting that we know he's a robot for most of it. And Nietzsche's philosophy never makes room for whether or not we should talk about robots, but Roy is probably the most immoral out of everyone in the film.
Well, that's the really interesting thing is, I guess, to use a Nietzsche book title, it's kind of like everybody else is human, all too human, and Roy as a replicant is more human in a lot of ways. He is the more moral, the more ethical. And I mean, yeah, he does terrible stuff in this film, but
less so than everyone else.
Yeah, and I guess it is kind of in comparison, but he seems to be concerned with the things that, like you said, he should be concerned with as a person who exists, and he seems to have more humanity and vibrance in him. I think because he's realized that he is mortal, maybe, and he is trying to. Maybe he doesn't fully, have amor fati, the love of fate, and love of his fate, but he definitely makes the most of what he has.
And there's an interesting image of almost him transcending what this world's given him when he finally dies. His head's down, but then we see the white dove flying up.
Well,
and
it's
such a
all
good contrast.
It's all very weirdly Christ-like too, and like he gets the nail through the hand, and yeah, it's weird.
Symbolism.
Yeah, a lot of.
Well, that's very interesting too, because he essentially kills God in this. So
yeah,
it's kind of turning those
purposes,
symbols on its head.
Mm. Well, the way I see it is it's a soldier whose whole life has been war, because he talks about that. He says he's seen so many things, that he's seen all these horrible things at the end, and then he dies, and then of course the white dove comes up, and that's the symbol for peace. And it's just it's very much like the soldier he can finally just live in. Well, the only way he can be at peace is to be dead. So.
And I guess to marry those two perspectives, like your soldier idea and our just religious idea that we just came up with, there's this great recurring image of eyes and this great conversation about eyes throughout the whole film, and eyes being the window into the soul, about how soldiers have a specific look to them and how humans have a specific look to them, and this great philosophy that eyes are a two-way mirror informing both the person of who you are and the other person of who you are. And it's really fascinating that they're looking into the replicant's eyes when they're doing that void comp test. And they're looking straight at them, and they're seeing them without seeing them. They're seeing them with this assumption that they're not human. But just to anyone else looking in on them, they're nothing but human.
I think there's some interesting symbolism with the bird, too, in that it seems to go back to the animals thing, like, the birds, all of the animals in this film, I think that we see are like manufactured, because like we've basically destroyed the entire ecosystem. So I don't know specifically what they're trying to say there, but it's like, I don't know if birds can fly away or kind of what it is, and if that ties into the whole leaving Earth thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Whether or not it's a real bird is just another question to throw on the list of moral ambiguity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, even like ontological ambiguity, because like we don't know what is what.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to talk a little bit about what's his face, the guy who is human, because we kind of brought this up but didn't even talk about him. There's the guy who I guess he works for the Tyrell Corporation. He builds all his little like toys and playthings, and he has some disease that causes him to age very, very rapidly. But like he's considered to be human. Yeah. He's considered to be human, but he lives as long as the replicants, pretty much. Well, I guess longer, but much shorter than a regular person should.
Well, I could make the argument to you that he isn't human because he is aging so fast. But
that's the thing. If you're going to go with that definition, then who else gets kind of shunted out from under that label?
Because it's just I think you could make an argument that no one in this film is human.
Right, yeah, then we get into that whole argument of whether or not the definition of human is even adequate.
Is it even relevant?
Yeah.
I think this film is I think coming away with if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it's a duck. And the replicants do human things, they feel human things, so they're human. It doesn't matter how long they live. It doesn't matter that they're specifically programmed to do a certain thing or created to do a certain thing. We don't really know. I don't think they talk too much about them being like specifically programmed, but I guess the replicants in this movie are biological organisms as opposed to the book where they are straight up androids.
Yeah, it's interesting how they, despite being robots and despite having specific functions of their job is this or their career in life is this, they're still able to question so much. And the film might even say, because it makes a lot of allusions to Descartes and if I think therefore I am, and that's kind of the philosophy they're walking out of this with. If you think you exist in this moment, if you're able to think, if you're able to reason, then you're a human being and you're there and you exist.
Mm-hmm.
And then they tied in a lot to a person's identity. When we go back to the philosophy of the mind, how much do the memories really matter in determining who you are?
Yeah, and does that matter if they're implanted or not?
Yeah, because they are still yours to an extent.
Yeah.
In fairness, I have plenty of memories that I didn't necessarily want to have. I didn't choose every experience that, I wanted to have in my life. And that goes, I'm sure, for everyone. So, again, how is that all that different from the replicants?
Yeah, exactly. And within those 4 years of life, they do create their own memories also. They get mixed in with their pre-programmed ones.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're talking about knowledge and being human just comes from experience and comes from living, then there's nothing to say that they aren't human.
Yeah, I'm totally sympathetic to Roy.
Yeah, very much so.
Is there any place else that you guys really wanted to go with this? Because I feel like we've touched on a lot in kind of a short time.
Could you make the case, I was just thinking about this, that this could be a story about the initial outbreak of, well, obviously not an initial, but the whole AIDS argument? Could you make the argument that the replicants are being treated like how homosexuals were being treated at the time in some form or fashion? thinking about that now.
Yeah, I think they could conceivably stand in for any group that's kind of been discriminated against or seen as less than human, despite being so.
Hmm.
This is just yet another thing. Like how long they live is just as irrelevant as skin color or who you love. So, yeah, I think you could look at it that way, in that they are a stand-in for LGBT people, or for people of color, or anything really.
Yeah, and even like now, you could talk about like class warfare and say it's the same kind of thing with the Tyrell Corporation having so much and giving so little back.
Yeah, and that's the interesting little bit of subtext in this film too. Is it seems like corporations run the world.
Yeah, there's fascinating business talk in the movie. Not like legal speak or anything from TV about stocks or whatever, but about kind of the state of the world that comes about by like capitalism. That whole Rawls case of sure, you can spend money and you can make everyone fair and equal, but after a certain point, to make the most money or to have this biggest empire ever, you're going to have to do things that are demoral to other human beings. And exaggerating that's what kind of probably led up to destroying the whole planet and making it this dark, bleak place.
There's some fan theories out there that say that like Blade Runner and Alien are in the same universe, and like Tyrell Corporation and Weyland-Yutani are like both these two huge companies, like giant conglomerates that exist in the world, and like in the Alien universe, everybody is traveling off to all these colony planets and stuff. So like it kind of fits together in a weird way.
Yeah.
I read that some people think Total Recall happens in the same universes, but I like the Alien theory better because.
Well, Total Recall would make sense because that is also based off of a Philip K. Dick novel.
Oh, okay.
So they have similar origins, I guess. But yeah, the Alien thing, like it does kind of fit in a weird way. And I kind of want to see, like, was Roy Batty fighting like alien monsters before he showed up on Earth?
He was
like, I'd watch that movie. Because they are making some type of Blade Runner sequel or prequel or something.
Yeah, Ridley Scott's making a sequel, and there's like 3 sequel novels.
And they're sequels to the
movie,
movies, right?
Apparently they're made to kind of bridge the gap of like why the movie and the book are different. But I don't know how that makes any sense.
Yeah, I don't really either. But that would be worth looking into. I'm kind of curious about the new Blade Runner movie. Given that it's Ridley Scott, like, I don't know. I haven't seen Prometheus yet. I just, heard such terrible things about it, so I don't know how well it fits with, like, Alien.
I actually enjoyed it, despite what people say. Like, granted, I think it's more, that movie's more about asking questions than necessarily answering them. It's like,
interesting.
I think it's more important that I think it's trying to make the point that we ask these questions, and more than anything, I was going to say we should put that on the list too. But
yeah.
I'm not sure how this might change the conversation a little bit, but according to an interview that Ridley Scott did back in October of 2012, he was asked if Harrison Ford's going to be in it, and he says he doesn't know yet. And then he was asked if he's too old, and he says, well, he was a Nexus 6, so we don't know how long he can live. So
well,
clearly
that pretty
Scott
definitively says that, yeah, he is.
And Philip K. Dick goes quite the opposite way and says he wrote him as a human being. So
yeah.
Well, there you go. You got the director and the writer on 2 different wavelengths. So
I'm kind of curious to see a return to this universe, and I don't know that I'm really too interested in necessarily seeing like what happens to Deckard after this. But I think there's plenty of potential to play around in this world.
So you would much rather explore the world than the characters or anything.
Yeah, like I'm open to a sequel, but not so much like a sequel in terms of the characters, because they are. I don't say like they're one dimensional, because that's not really true, but they're very much archetypes. I feel,
And they're meant to be.
and yeah, they're meant to be, and so I don't. We're not really in this for the characters. We're in this for maybe what they go through, which are kind of general human condition sort of things. But I think you could explore that with new people, and maybe take some type of different angle with it. Because one thing that we talked about, like it could be really interesting if they went the other direction and made a film in this universe that said like, no, they're not human. Because we talked about with Terminator how it seems like the free will versus determinism thing is completely different in the first movie versus the second movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I'm on the opposite spectrum then, because I don't want a sequel. I feel like what the themes of this film are, they're pretty definitive, and they're pretty all-encompassing. And I don't know how you would make a sequel without just retreading what we already know or directly contradicting what we already know. Because it's on such a big scale.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're talking about the mindsets and definitions of humanity and you're giving a definitive answer in just one barely 2-hour film, where are you going to take that?
Well, that's the thing is like why I feel if they need to do a sequel, or if they feel the need, like I don't think this needs a sequel. Definitely, I agree there. But if they're going to do it, just like explore something completely different in this universe, because the themes in this are so general and universal that would be kind of retreading it.
Would you want to see it remade at all?
Oh no.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to. I think this holds up pretty well.
Well, even still, like, it was only made in, like, 1982, and we keep getting new versions of it every couple of years. I feel like if you're gonna remake it, it doesn't make any sense, because it didn't leave anyone's mind yet. It's not like there's a generation that grew up without a Blade Runner DVD being released.
Yeah, really, because there have been numerous versions of this film, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, like, the very version we're watching just came out in 2007.
Yeah. I haven't seen the other one, so I can't comment on that.
I've seen one of them. I don't know which one it is. It has the narration. And the narration is really interesting because it does fill in some things of like what characters are thinking and feeling, or at least Deckard is thinking and feeling. Makes him a little bit less of a blank slate. And I don't know if that's necessarily better or worse, given that he is somewhat, like we said, archetypal and sort of, exists that way for a reason. But Harrison Ford really didn't want to do it, so his performance in the voiceovers is just terrible. So like losing it kind of makes things better, but at the same time, if they included it, that would have been, again, very, very film noir to have like the detective character doing the voiceover.
I think the problem with the voiceovers, though, because I love the film noir aspect of voiceovers, and initially I was kind of devastated that we were going to watch a version without the voiceover, because I love voiceover. But the problem with those were that they spelled too much out. Even if you go back to like Sam Spade or Philip Marlowe noir films, when they give a narration, it's only there to say that we didn't feel like filming this scene, so this is how these two things connect. And they're not necessarily there to get inside someone's head. Like, there's a very specific narration at the end of the film where Deckard says, "I don't know why he spared me." And that really hinders the subtext and the generality of it, of what you could derive. I don't feel Deckard is so stupid, necessarily, that he wouldn't understand why Roy spared him.
Yeah, that's maybe a good point. If it makes him come across as kind of stupider, then that's not a good thing. Yeah, I definitely see how not including them makes the film... It allows the film to get across its themes, yet somehow be maybe a little bit more ambiguous, or lets the viewer fill in the gaps and maybe feel smarter.
Gives it a bit more mystique.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Steve, you and I were talking about this last night with the Dark Knight films, and that like Jim Gordon gives these gigantic speeches at the end of each one that basically fills everybody in on what the theme of the film was.
Yeah,
And,
I hate those.
well, I like them. I think they work, and I think they're subtle enough. But what you're describing, does not sound subtle at all. It feels like you're kind of
I don't mean like
beating people over the head with it. But
yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't mean like I hate Gordon's speeches per se. I hate the idea of feeling the need to explain what we just saw, or feeling the need to give us exactly what a character thinks of, or give us an exact interpretation of what we just saw, especially when you're dealing with something that's kind of a question that we're never going to answer about, like what is human and what makes human. And you're going to give a pretty definitive answer of this is clearly human. And then you make your character say that, well, we think this is human, and it makes them almost like they didn't live through the experiences of the film with us.
that's fair. I will say.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just say I'll say in like the Dark Knight's defense, and kind of in Dark Knight Rises too, Gordon is saying those things to somebody, and somebody who doesn't understand. Like first it's his child, and then it's kind of John Blake who's still trying to figure things out. So to some extent, I guess it works in those contexts, but
right.
Yeah, if it's kind of non sequitur, it doesn't work, and it's just kind of just beating people over the head with what the theme is. Speaking of Batman, it reminds me a lot of his Silicon Soul, which is kind of interesting because the guy who plays Sebastian in the movie voices Carl Rossum in the animated series. He makes Hardak, which is like Terminator robots, basically. But at the end of his Silicon Soul, Batman says, like, he gives this big speech about, like, maybe he did have a soul, but one made of silicon. And it's like, yeah, we get
it. Yeah, exactly. I have no opposition to narrations, and I have no opposition to, like, final monologues. It's just the ones in Blade Runner I feel were pretty definitively poorly written.
Fair enough.
I think that's probably why Ridley Scott decides to cut him out every time he makes a director's cut. And sure, Harrison Ford's performance wasn't great in those, but I just don't think the narrations make any sense.
Mm-hmm. It's been such a long time since I've read the original book, but yeah, I imagine Philip K. Dick would have handled them a lot better.
Oh yeah, the book is fantastic when it comes to leaving it ambiguous and yet still giving you a narration.
Did we have anything else we wanted to touch on with this? Because I feel to some extent there is a lot to talk about with this film, but it is also very straightforward in what it's trying to say.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything more I really want to say.
I feel like there's a lot I want to say. I just have no idea what it is.
I just want to express my humanness somehow.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know that necessarily can take like verbal form, but
yeah, maybe this is closer to a closing monologue of some kind, which I just expressed I don't like. But I really, really love this movie. Like, it's one of my favorite films of all time, and for some reason, it's a really hard film to discuss. And it's not because it doesn't say anything, it's because it says so much, and it's not like something like the Dark Knight trilogy or something like other noir films, where every idea is, like, independent to itself. Every idea in this film is so interwoven with each other, and you can combine them in so many different ways. It makes it really hard to dissect. Like, how do you space out a presentation on Blade Runner?
Yeah, it's very... I know, it's like this sort of a crystal, and like every facet of it reflects every other facet.
Right? I couldn't even take notes on it when I was watching it, because I wasn't sure where to split up the ideas.
Mm-hmm. And I think, too, it's hard to talk about just because it is a film about what it means to be human, and a lot of that is feelings. And That's
Yeah.
just the stuff that we feel.
Mhm.
Yeah. It evokes a very specific vibe when you're watching it, and it's a vibe that's hard to put into words, but I'm sure everyone gets it when they see it. It's this weird, uncomfortable, but still really interesting feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Magpie, given that you're more favorable towards the film now, do you think this is something that you'll rewatch at some point?
Yeah, but it's not going to be something I'll rewatch for a while yet because
Mm-hmm.
it does require some time for some digestion, I think.
Definitely.
And if your first experience is pretty bad, wait a while. I waited a couple of weeks before I rewatched this. So for anyone that's out there that has watched it and hasn't rewatched it, give it another go. And yeah, you might find yourself enjoying it that more, because I actually did. Like, for anyone that was listening to the last one, you probably heard me go, "Oh God, I'm not looking forward to it." But then, watched it.
We converted you.
I'm glad.
Yeah, I think that does it for Blade Runner, I guess. I'm going to metaphorically pass the mic across the ocean to Magpie and to say what we're going to be covering next time.
Yes, we're going to be covering. I think the easiest way to say this is Christopher Eccleston's run on Doctor Who. So the first season of the rebooted not rebooted, but the continuation of Doctor Who. So we'll be covering that, and yeah, some of us haven't watched that yet, so it'll be really interesting to see what people have to say on that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, so that's next time, people. I guess that's it. So, meeting adjourned, gentlemen.
Yeah,
I feel like we
would
should
say
end
so.
this very poetically and have someone recite the Tears in a Rain soliloquy.
You're a guest, Steve.
I'm kidding. No one can deliver it as well as him.
Okay. So, remember, people, we're not going to live very long, but then again, who does?